Welcome to Web Development Lesson 1.1. In this lesson, we're going to explore what is HTML, go into the basic structure of a web page, as well as an HTML element, and then learn your first couple of HTML elements. So let's get to it. So if you do a quick search for HTML, you're going to find out that it's an acronym that stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's not a programming language. It doesn't have if statements, variables, for loops, but it does have syntax, grammar, and the potential for errors. So I still want you to treat it as coding. So with practice, you're going to pick up, the differences between, what programming language coding is and HTML coding. Again, this will make more sense if we get into an example, which is what we're going to do now. So Replit, the website REPLIT, is a great online platform for exploring different programming languages. And in our case, what we're going to use it for is to explore HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So let's go ahead and log in. Now, when you go to log in, you have the option to log in with a Google account, which is what we're going to do. So we're going to click on the G. We're going to type in our Google account, which in my case, I'm going to use my baselihighschool.org account. Okay, so once you log in, you're going to get this dashboard, which has a bunch of options for your replets, the ones that you create. But what we're going to focus right now is how to create a new replit. You got a couple different ways of doing it. You could click on this button if this side of the dashboard's available. You could click on this button, or you could click here. I'm going to go with this one because this is the one that's always there. So as I mentioned, Replit is a great platform for exploring different programming languages such as Python, Java, Node.js, C, C++. I would highly encourage you, like if you need to explore a programming language, use Replit. It's very flexible and robust. But for us, we're going to click on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, usually when you create a project, it's going to give you some silly name. I would suggest you name these according to the lesson that you're doing. So we're doing Web Development Lesson 1.1. So a quick tour of the environment. Again, if you haven't used it in a while or you're new to Replit. So on the left side, you're going to see options for files that you're going to use with your web page. So web development pretty much consists of having a HTML page, perhaps having some programming in terms of JavaScript, and a CSS page, how to change the styling of your page. Again, we're going to get to these in future lessons. But this left panel, that's where you have your files. This would also be where you include like sound files, images, if you so choose to have that as part of your web page. This middle section is where you're actually going to do your coding. So depending on which page you have clicked, that particular code is going to pop up. So right now we have the index.html, which is the main file for your web page, and that's what's being displayed. This side is a little preview page. So whatever you have coded in your web page is going to pop up here once you hit run. This bottom part is called your console. We're not going to play around with this until we actually get to JavaScript. So let's get back to the coding. So when you create a project, you're going to get a lot more than what you need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start stripping away some of the things that we don't necessarily need right now. I would ask in the future, just ignore it. When you create your project, it's not going to hurt you. It's there to help you. But we're not going to explain what these different options are. So the first one we're going to get rid of for this lesson is the meta. The next one we're going to get rid of is this line. Now, I will cover what this line does, because again, in a future video, you're going to need to learn this one. So this line is how we're going to bring in our CSS into our web page. Again, we're not doing CSS, so we're getting rid of that. This line is how we're going to bring our programming into our web page, our JavaScript. Again, we're not doing any JavaScript, so we're getting rid of that one. And now we have what is called our basic web page, the structure of our basic web page. Let's talk a little bit of what you're looking at. I'm going to skip this line for now. You'll notice that there's a bunch of less than signs and greater than signs. We're going to call those brackets. And inside those brackets, you're going to see words. The combination of those brackets and words is called an HTML element. Now, this element that I'm highlighting right now, technically, is the HTML element. It kind of tells the computer, okay, from here to here, we're going to write HTML. Now, you'll notice that there's kind of like a matching one at the bottom, except that there's a slash. This is called the closing HTML element. And you're going to notice that throughout this basic structure, there's a lot of open and closing. Again, you got to tell the browser everything on how to design the web page. The computer's stupid. It's got to know all the commands. So inside the HTML element, you'll see that there's a head element. And inside the head element, there's a title element. So you're going to notice this as you start doing more web development, that there's a lot of embedding of elements within another one. Again, with practice, you're going to get used to it. But what you will notice is that here's the opening element. Here's the closing element with the slash. Here's the opening element. Here's the closing element with the slash. And then you'll see some information. So in this one, we got the title replit. So let's go ahead and run it, and let's see if we can spot where we see it. So you're going to notice nothing pops up on the page when we run it. That's because the title's not meant to be on the page. Now, in this preview window, you can actually open something in a separate window, separate tab. So we're going to do that. This little icon here will open the browser in its own tab. And right up here, this is your title, which I'm sure you've seen in many web pages. Matter of fact, you can see here in the Wikipedia page, the title right now is HTML Wikipedia. So it is a useful element because it lets the user see when they have multiple tabs open, which tab corresponds to which web page. So let's go ahead and just change that to, let's say, Hello World. Let's run it again. Now, there's no need for you to open the tab again. What you can do is go back to your web page, the one that you opened up in a new browser, and hit F5 for refresh. And you'll see the words Hello World now. So we've effectively changed the title HTML element. All right, so now you might ask, well, how do I actually get something on the web page? Well, that's this section here, the body HTML element. Anything you put here will pop up on a web page. So let's write the Hello World. And let's go ahead and hit run. So the first thing you'll notice is that it's pretty simple. You write some words in the body HTML element, and it pops on a web page. That's it. You got yourself a web page. But let's say we wanted this to be kind of like a title for our web page. Well, they're kind of small. We need to have a little more emphasis on it. Well, for this, we're going to use our heading element. So I'm going to start typing a new element by opening up the bracket, start typing what I want, and what I want is an H. Let me do that again. Now, one of the nice things about having an ID is that as you start typing, it will give you suggestions as to what to type. So let's type in H1. Now, don't forget, your HTML elements start with an opening bracket and then closing bracket. So let's put Hello World back in. Now, the other thing that some beginning web developers forget to do is that you open the H1 element, but you forgot to close it. So let's go ahead and close it. Again, you're going to find that HTML is very unforgiving when it comes to errors, in that it might let some things slide that you don't want to happen. And then when you get these huge web pages, those errors will come back to bite you in the butt. So try to get some good coding practices started now so that you don't develop bad practices later on when your websites become bigger. And the one right here I'm mentioning is when you open up a tag, close it immediately. Or close it where it needs to be closed. Again, these are small websites, so this is fine. So let's go ahead and run this. And there we go. So we can see here we have Hello World. It's bigger, it's bold. That's what the H1 does. Now, you might have recalled that as we started typing, there was options for other types of H1s. So let's do an H6. All right, so you'll notice that H6 is smaller, but it is still bold. Again, these are meant to be titles on your web page. So you can use everything from H1 to H6. That's up to you. Okay. I'm going to put the Hello World back in here just for comparison. And let me switch that back over to 1 because H6 is way too small. I've never used H6. I typically rotate between H1 and H3 for different size titles. All right. So the next element I want to teach you is called the paragraph. So paragraph is P. So with practice, you're going to find that the HTML elements aren't going to be hard to remember. The code that you write is representative of the element that you're trying to add. But please remember it's open bracket, the element name, which in this case is a paragraph, and then the closing bracket. Now you might want to get used to this practice too, just so you don't forget it, to close the paragraph. So if you open an element, close the element, just so you don't forget it, and then go back in and actually type what you want. So let's say this is a paragraph, period. Let's run it. Okay, so you'll see that a paragraph doesn't give you anything special in terms of size or highlighting bold, but it does create a section where you can write, some more information, some lengthier information about some topic that you're interested in. Right, the last thing I want to cover is a peculiarity that you might not think would have happened. So one more sentence. And let me run this. So notice in our code, we decided to put one more sentence underneath this is a paragraph. And this is the way we want it to display on the screen. But notice it doesn't. That's because in HTML, you have to tell the browser everything. You have to tell the browser to skip a line. So now I'm going to teach you another element. And this one's special. Hopefully you can spot the difference between this tag and all the other tags you've explored so far on this page. It doesn't have a closing component to it. BR stands for break. Now, because it's not meant to really house anything in it, the element is itself. That's all. You don't need anything else. It's just meant to break a line. It doesn't have a slash bracket. Now, could you put one in? You could, but that is bad web development because technically there is no such thing as a closing bracket, but the web page will let you add it. So this is where I'm saying, error handling in web development can be a little bit tricky when it comes to HTML because the browser will let things slide that it really doesn't need or that it's simply just going to ignore. So let's see what the break does. And there you go. So you can see it took it down to the next line. Let's say I wanted to create a little more space between my H1 and my paragraph. I could do, a couple of breaks here, just to simply tell the computer, skip down a couple of lines before you write the paragraph. You can see I moved down. So let's go back to our overview and let's review what we've covered. So we talked about, HTML, that it is the language that we're going to use to design our web pages in terms of putting elements on the screen. We talked about the basic structure of a web page and the basic structure of an element. which is, an opening bracket, some word to represent that element, such as title, H1, P for paragraph, BR for break. So hopefully you're excited. Trust me, your websites will become more attractive with the more elements that you learn. Enjoy.